What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Knipe here with Always.
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 1981 classic, The House by the Cemetery.
Oh, you're the bat.
I'm the bat. That's right. I am the bat that will not die. Scissors be damned.
The little bat in Que la Villa Encanto al Cimitero. I thought that you would just say like, Mommy, 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 I'm scared. Mommy, Mommy, there's a girl. She was talking to me. Mommy, Mommy.
Well, I was thinking about using some dialogue by our dear Bob, but I thought maybe since I did a bit of dialogue for Happy Birthday to Me last time, that maybe I should try to find a sound effect, maybe do a little bit more Foley work this time around. And with the extended bat attack scene that takes place in this film, I thought it the perfect opportunity. This is a Lydia pick.
It definitely is. And it really ties in nicely, I think, to our conversation briefly last episode about a film being pieces like, in that you've got that ADR for people who speak the opposite language and people being able to just do their lines in their native tongue, which is kind of cool. And that was a thing that went on in Pieces, and having like a young, weird, annoying boy in some of your opening sequences. And like, well, there's a very different opening sequence, much like Pieces. There is a quasi unrelated opening scene with people you never ever see again, which is great. So it's got a lot of like qualities that are similar to what is maybe my favorite movie of all time in Pieces. So I think that my being like not a huge fan of giallo, not a huge fan of Italian horror cinema, not a huge fan of Lucio Fulci, I think I've grown into it because this was a film that I saw only in the last 2 years, and I absolutely fell in love with it. But I think that if teenage Lydia would have seen this, I would have felt that the beginning opening sequence with the knife stabbing through the head was a bait and switch, because then it goes into like yawn territory for me as a teen. But now I absolutely love this. It's absurd. It's bloody. It's modern. It's those Italian films that are filmed in or as a stand-in for the United States, which I think is just weird. And it lends a whole other level of that absurd familiarity, sort of a liminal familiarity, because it's these people with a very different fashion sense and a very different socioeconomic sense and very different like boundaries when it comes to how they treat children and women and bats. So I just really like that. It's like supplanting this bizarro world into the commonplace.
This film is the final installment in the unofficial Lucio Fulci trilogy, the Gates of Hell trilogy. And that would be including, well, the City of the Living Dead and The Beyond, other very famous Fulci films. This one was the most financially successful of Fulci's career in the decade of the 1980s. So this one actually was like a pretty large success. And we haven't covered Fulci films really on this podcast at all in all of our years. And I don't know why that is. One of my favorite zombie films of all time is Zombie, much like everybody else who really likes Lucio Fulci films, Zombie or Zombie 2, or if you're in the UK, Zombie Flesh Eaters. That is probably his most famous film, would you say?
I'd say that I've done my part to make the very end of Don't Torture a Duckling the most famous Lucio Fulci film. I agree, though. I do agree.
You do like
I think
that movie.
Zombie, fake shark, real zombie is a band out of Vancouver that has their namesake due to that film. So, like, let alone all of the times that it's been quipped and quoted, and that it's been talked about, how they filmed it, the danger he's put people in while filming it, things like that. Um, I think that it is the most famous, but yeah, I think I've grown into liking this sort of film, which is interesting to me. I'm curious to see what other Italian cinema I've grown into enjoying that I had passed off, seen, or wasn't interested in before, and I may have to give Bay of Blood another go.
Bay of Blood really benefits from repeat viewings. I do find, although my God, do I have a hard time differentiating some characters in that particular film. And I'm not the only one. I have heard common complaints about people not quite clear who just died in Twitch of the Death Nerve because uh, people just kind of look the same in that movie, unfortunately. But I'm glad that we're finally able to tackle some Fulci work. There is a cadence to horror films that are coming out of Italy in and around the 1970s and 1980s. Some of the weird staccato is, of course, the fact that most of the time these films, they would have multiple actors from all over the world who spoke different languages. Generally speaking, people would speak their native language, and wherever the market was, they would swap that person's voice out. They would dub it. And so sometimes you are looking at people who are speaking really, and it's their voice, and you can understand them. And other times you are dealing with somebody who sounds very bizarre and their mouth doesn't quite line up. And it can do something to your brain where you're not entirely sure, wait, is this an American film? Because if you didn't know what we know now, what we have access to here in the year 2025, when these films were initially coming out, if you weren't paying too close attention, although there is a large amount of Italian names in the opening credits of these films, but they try very hard to make sure that you know that this is taking place in America. Or if things weren't actually shot in America, they will scrub it clean of as much European telltale signs as they possibly can to and try to fool you into thinking that you're watching an American production, because that's what the Italian directors like to do the best, is to really make you think that you're watching a good old-fashioned American horror film.
Like the spaghetti western of yore. That's why we get that particular title. If you've ever wondered, I'm no professional in spaghetti westerns, but at least I'm aware of why they're like this. And this, what would you call this? Like a spaghetti slasher, in a way. They wanted to do that, and I find that little niche in the '80s of Italian filmmakers filming in or passing off portions of Europe for the US very interesting to me. And I mean, yeah, the names should set you off. Or like you got to realize that this little blonde boy, Giovanni Frezza, Bob, Bob with the most American name as his cast name, Bob, his character, sounds like a 40-year-old woman. Like it is, if it's not Bart Simpson's voice, I don't know what it is. It's amazing to me. This kid, he sounds so fucking weird. And every time, like now that I've watched it 2.5 times, I watched half of it just for Bob at one point in between viewings before we decided to do it for the show, because I was just weirded out by this kid. And because he looks like, a Children of the Damned kind of looking kid. So he's got a creepy look to begin with. And the dubbing does him absolutely no favors. I really, really like that, but I find he's the most surreal portion of it. I think that if someone hasn't been watching this because it is an older film or because it's an Italian film and you're expecting that it would be schlocky perhaps, or that it is a giallo, it's really not. If you enjoy like Hell House, if you enjoy Amityville, I think that this is right up there with that.
And it's the blending of genres, right? You have Fulci, who was inspired apparently by H.P. Lovecraft. You have his co-writer, evidently inspired by Turn of the Screw. Lots of great movies are based off of Turn of the Screw. And so what you have here is something that I wouldn't really call Lovecraftian in an old one sense, but if you look at some of his zombie stories, you would see where that inspiration would come from. And I mean, Turn of the Screw, there is ghosts in it. We think, we're sure. There are ghosts. And yeah, Bob, what do you want to say about old Bob? We'll put this on Front Street right now. The character, there is this character named Bob in the film, and he's in contention with many people's minds as one of the most annoying characters that is in horror films. And this is including characters like Franklin from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't find that character annoying, but greatly misunderstood. I feel sorry for him, truly. The little boy from the Babadook. That kid's very annoying, but that movie is annoying. So I don't really fault the kid. This kid could be a lot worse. And I suspect that it's the dubbing that's the problem, not the performance of the original actor. So I do think it's kind of a shame and unfair that a lot of the complaints about this film get lobbed at his very young feet.
Yes, and I agree. Now that we were discussing this before recording today, and there is a version, which I was hoping there was a version of this film where the English speaking actors are dubbed in Italian and the Italian speaking actors are left to speak their native tongue. And Bob sounds normal, to the delight and relief of all, I'm sure, nationwide, that Bob sounds fucking normal. He's got a normal little kid voice. You may have heard his voice if you've watched the end of the film Demons. He's the kid in the Jeep with the gun. A really cool little role. I wasn't clear on who he was in Demons because it was 5 years later and I was convinced he was like a teen or something, but he's not. He's at the end of the film. Little blonde boy, if you recall. So we may have heard his voice there. He sounds very normal. He doesn't sound like a 30-year-old woman screaming, "Mommy, mommy, I'm scared, mommy. Mommy, she's talking to me. Mommy, I'm bored." And misnaming his obvious monkey for Yogi, the bear. Maybe that's why he's so annoying. Like there is a parallel. There is a parallel with him and the kid, the Babadook, when his babysitter is trapped in the basement and he decides to go rescue her. And he goes through that getting, armed with kid toys and kid weapons and a flashlight, at least, before going down into the basement. And it reminds me of the kid in the Babadook getting suited up to fight the monster or whatever. He doesn't scream and yell quite as much as the kid in the Babadook, though.
No, and I would argue that scarier things are happening to Bob than the kid in the Babadook. And by the way, like, if we're talking about zombie films that came out in 1981 out of Italy with creepy young people in them, how can anyone even consider Bob in the contention when Michael exists from Burial Grounds, one of the most insane fucking little puppet boys I've ever seen in my entire life, with gang, some real mommy issues.
Yeah, and like Bob, for the most part, is a believable, well acted, interesting looking little character. Right? So he's got a lot going for him. It's just like you said, that unfortunate circumstance of the ADR here, because he does, like I said, sound normal in the Italian version, which I think I next time I watch The House by the Cemetery, which I'll have you know, I wasn't even really aware of this film until hearing it titled in a Wednesday 13 song where he mentions it. And I was like, oh, I like Wednesday 13. have to watch this House by the Cemetery film he talks of.
What a charming coincidence. I used that Wednesday 13 song to promote this very video, or sorry, this episode of the podcast that we're recording on Instagram. I put a picture up of the DVD and I said, you know what, I'll just pick this Wednesday 13 song. They're talking about House by the Cemetery, and that seems appropriate. Fuck all that, Lydia. What is this movie even about anyways? Not Bob, maybe.
It's sort of about Bob because, I mean, how could you avoid having a warning from a little ghost girl? When you get a warning from a little ghost girl, pay attention, pay strict attention. Even if you think your kid is making stuff up, when they're telling you that they have a warning, a very adult, succinct, clear warning. If you have a picture of the house that you're going to move into on the wall in your house right now, and you realize this when you go to move to that house, that's another warning. Run. If people have been murdered in your house, that's a warning. Run. Heed your warnings. For all the times that we complain about films not having good communication, and if people would have just communicated with one another, this movie doesn't have that problem. The problem is that they are getting warnings they're not heeding. They should have never moved into this house.
If nothing else, then for the smell that I assume has got to be emanating from every aspect of this film. We start out, Lydia, with a kill, and we are going to get a big heaping helping of a Fulci style kill. Fulci's films have a bit of a reputation of a lot of close-up shots of violence being committed with implements, mostly knives. And this film is no exception. We are going to get some deaths with this young lady and her boyfriend after a tryst. And we're going to see some breasts too, in case you were worried about that. But we are going to get a wonderful kill scene right off the bat. And you're going to have to enjoy that, gang. Because no fucking, you got to eat your vegetables before you get another kill scene in this movie. I'm going to tell you that much. And the next death that you're going to get is probably not one that you're suspecting. They do make up for it later. But one of the things that this film is going to do is kick in the balls with a gruesome death, knife to the back of the head, out the mouth. Great stuff. And then you are going to be introduced to this family and the trials and tribulations of moving.
Well, the horrors of moving, the horrors of having a child at all. Bob, we get to meet Bob. We also get to meet Lucio Fulci in the street, where they're talking about what a terrible world this is, because you have to move because you're going to go and finish your predecessor's work, who killed his mistress and himself and left this house and this research undone. So now you have to head out there and finish his work. Like, what a world we live in, says Lucio Fulci in the guise of another professor. And then he's like, well, anyway, I'm going to get a taxi cab. It's kind of interesting. The pacing of this film is a little bit stop and start at the beginning, I find. And I think that's what it would have turned me off as a younger viewer. But I appreciate it because it's nice to have that set piece death at the beginning and then just sort of settle in. It's like you're in Pet Cemetery and you're moving out to the countryside and you're meeting the Creed family and you're meeting the neighbors. And like, that's what it feels like. But it's a house by a cemetery. So it's so much more goth, I find. So I really did settle into these beginning scenes of them getting ready to moving to a house sight unseen, which is one of our favorite tropes in film. And having those little tidbits, like the little girl screaming in the window of the house, the picture of that house being on the wall of the apartment they're leaving in New York. It sets you up for a lot of like mystery, and I really appreciate that.
Yes, this is where the blending of genres really comes in, I feel like, because you really are starting off, and the film feels like a slasher, perhaps. We have slasher things. We got bodies hanging off of doors. We got knives in the back of the head. For all we know, good old Jason Voorhees is down in that damn basement. But then we enter the real portion of the film after the opening credits. And in this case, we are now settling into what is playing off as a haunted house film. We have creepy kids, possible psychic connection, moving into a new house, as you said, sight unseen. Parents talking about jobs and picking up research, and we are looking at mothers putting dishes away. These are all the hallmarks of a haunting. And I find it so fascinating that we're going to get that, but the ghosts are kind of the least of it. And they really only operate as ways to, I suppose, in a weird way, warn people. And by people, I mean Bob. But people don't really listen to Bob because he's a cherubic little blonde boy. What does he know about fucking anything? Once you're done with the slasher portions of this film, you also see two boring looking men in heavy wool jackets. One has a pipe, they're holding papers, and they're talking. If I have a complaint about Fulci's films, and really a lot of Italian horror, when you're not in the mood to listen to scruffy dudes talking in small rooms or while they're walking somewhere, holy fuck, do you not want to watch a Lucio Fulci movie? Because City of the Living Dead or The Beyond, New York Ripper, these are all films that have spectacular violence and horror elements in it, but far more guys in frumpy suits talking to each other.
Maybe it is my fascination with the frumpy tweed library scene that draws me to this film, because I like these scenes quite a lot in this. And I think that The Changeling grew on me for the same reason, because that's a whole film of a frumpy man in tweed yelling. And we get a couple of them, a couple of frumpsters. And we even get like a creepy frumpster to be in the younger professor that's in the library being ghoulish about where his predecessor had hung himself. And yeah, frumpsters to be.
He's
Maybe
so
it's because I'm
inappropriate.
edging on frumpster myself. You know, I have no tweed, but I don't know. Women usually wore a full tweed dress, and that sounds itchy and scratchy to me. I don't think I want to wear that, but I do like that sort of blending here, because you've got the ghost, much like in Turn of the Screw, being warnings from the past and an echo of the past. It to a certain extent, because I'm not really clear on Anna. We'll talk about the babysitter Anne in a second, but for the most part, these ghosts are simply there to be warnings from the past. And the monster sections of the film don't really come until the end. We're sort of bookmarked or bookended, so to speak, with this like creature. But in the middle, it's just a lot of spooky happenstance and atmosphere, and having cemetery things. Uh, the father throws out a line like, everyone has graves in their homes around here, sort of stuff, which is absurd, but it's that sort of atmosphere of New England just being a creepy fucking place, really, where creepy things happen, that I really can sink my teeth into with this film. Now, we have met this family that is moving out to the countryside in Whitby, New Whitby, near Boston, which is another thing that reminds me so much of Pieces, because it takes place in Boston as well, which I just like those sort of things, because Pieces is really one of my most favorite films. So any parallel to that film, I'm just really, really enjoying. But Bob has had the ghost of this little girl appear to him basically twice. She appeared in the photograph on their wall with her hand against the glass, yelling what looked to be a warning, like, no, stay away. And she appears to him once again while he's waiting for his parents to pick up the keys to their new house, waiting in a car, playing with his curious George monkey he calls Yogi. And well, I'm just so annoyed by that. And she can telepathically speak to him from across the road or something. They don't really explain her powers. And she says, I told you to stay away.
Well, she's shouting at him from across the road, but the problem seems to be that Bob's parents can't see her or hear her, apparently. And Bob frantically tries to convince, in the way a child would, that I was talking to a person. Part of the ADR problems here is that the Italian language and the English language obviously are quite different. And to get those mouth flaps, you need to just start inserting a whole bunch of words into this kid's mouth that he definitely wasn't saying. So it sounds so repetitive. Mom, I see him. I spoke to them. I heard them. I saw them. I was talking to somebody. I swear I was. And it's just very grating on the ear. May seems to have the ability to have a spooky mother show up in the background. They all talk. Her mother talks like she's a ghost, which is hilarious. They're just like, oh, whereas May has a normal indoor speaking voice. So I'm curious about, like, why did your mom talk like that? It's like, well, you know, she doesn't know. She thinks she has to.
That's hilarious because she has a normal speaking voice from across the road.
Yes. They're headed to the old Oak Mansion. Now, no matter what you say though, Lids, Oak Mansion is always Freudstein's house.
I would be the same way, living in a small town like that. There's the Calendar Bay Heritage Museum or whatever the fuck it's called. No, it's Dr. Defoe's house. It'll always be Dr. Defoe's house, or DeFeo, depending on how you want to pronounce that, because that was the doctor that delivered the Dion quintuplets, one of which has passed away. Annette is the only living quintuplet. It's a shame. It's so sad. But yeah, that house will always be that house. It doesn't have another name. So if there was a realtor trying to sell it and they were trying to call it the old museum, they'd get the same correction from most of the people. Oh, you mean Dr. DeFeo's house. Yeah, the Freudstein. Now that's an interesting name, isn't it? So we've got sort of like the psychological aspects of this film that they're trying to do, whether it's with the ghosts and a paranormal bent or not, captured in the first part of that name, Freud, and the monstrous part later on with the Steen. I really do like this sort of nudge into this is a psychological monster horror, because it kind of is.
Yeah, old subtle as a hand grenade, Fulci. By the way, I like that over the course of this podcast, you have shuffled off the quintuplets off this mortal coil by bringing them up every now and again.
Oh yeah, I can't not, because I spent enough time in their shadow as a child in the various museums. There was like a de facto museum at the Sears. There was a little Sears store in Calendar that had a whole lot of their memorabilia. Our house as a kid, I was surrounded by those like little paper doll books that kids have. There's Dion quintuplet paper doll books. I used to have numerous ones of those. We had little silver spoons, 5 of them, would you know? One for each of the Dion quintuplets on the spoon rack that we could eat our little cereals with if we wanted to when we were little. And we had toy dolls. My grandfather had a set of Dion quintuplet dolls. And we drove by their museum all the time and saw their 5 little carriages out in a row. So yeah, I was like continuously. Then I went and worked at the Dion quintuplets museum. Go figure.
I could listen to you talk about North Bay Calendar for hours. It seems like such a magical place.
It is a storybook little town. It really is. It's an odd little town. It's very much like a little Castle Rock, but smaller even. but only if you know where to look. Otherwise, it would just look like any other little former resort town, right?
Well, Oak Mansion is no resort town because we see that the place is in a horrible state of disrepair. It looks, I kind of like it's kind of homey and lived in. Now, I will say the crypt in the basement is a bit much. Bob's mother is going to be doing some house cleaning and discover this crypt, and it's going to bring her to tears. And as you pointed out, Norman is going to say the outrageously ridiculous statement that all the houses around here have crypts in them, as if that is a normal thing. And I couldn't quite figure out, is this just misdubbing or a language barrier or something? Or is it more common for old houses in Italy to have family crypts inside of them, and they're not considering that this is America? This is a far newer nation, and houses generally don't have crypts in them.
The first time I watched this, I tried to look this up and I couldn't find anything. And the second time that I watched it in full, I tried looking this up again. Do New England homes have crypts in them? No. No, they fucking don't. So, like, I don't, maybe there's a few houses, maybe there's one house with a fucking crypt in it. Like, Jesus Christ. And him to pass it off with, like, well, the ground freezes here. It's like, that's what charnel houses are for. They have crypts in charnel houses, not houses, you freak. But yeah, overseas, it is far more common to find graves in your basements because it's a much older area there, and there are family graves around the yards. We haven't done family graves around the yards in quite some time, and there are some small roadside family graves, but they're not in the house.
It's almost as if when he came home and he sees his wife crumpled on the ground, and he just, Norman is thinking to himself, oh my God, okay, well, how do we play this off? Well, you see, honey, it's a very common practice around these parts to have crypts in them. It's why the ground freezes. And her mood changes instantaneously. She's like, oh, and she's all happy again. And I can just imagine, there, honey. Ooh, look at this interesting thing that I got. And she's all excited and happy. And meanwhile, his internal monologue, he's like, you dumb bitch. I can't believe that worked.
They've had a few interactions like this before. Norman and Lucy, the married couple, have had like a hot and cold sort of thing. It's not quite hot and cold like other Italian cinema where they're at each other's throats and then banging the next minute, but it's like a very temperate version of that where they get kind of hot under the collar about something, and then she's like, well, what do you want for dinner, and just passes it off. Maybe that's a sign of a very good relationship, perhaps. Maybe it's also a sign that she's on massive amounts of Valium, which we'll find out that she fucking is. But I mean, that's how you tamed women back in the day. Hysterical women like her being hysterical in literal hysterics. But maybe that is the reaction. Maybe that is a very a believable reaction of finding a crypt in your home for some people. For me, it would be the opposite. But then again, I would look around this area because it looks very moody. It looks very Eel Marsh house. It's got a lot of mist and trees, and there's like an old crumbling graveyard. It's not like a brand new spiffy graveyard. It's a crumbling old abandoned graveyard around this house, and it's fucking awesome. The Victorian that they've moved into kind of has like a mirror to this graveyard because there's sort of coffin shapes in some of the eaves and tombstone shapes in the other side of the house. Like, it's just a very cemetery looking house. It's gorgeous. So maybe she's unnerved by all that, which on the other hand, some people are extremely unnerved by all that. All those things that I've just described as beautiful and wonderful and things that would draw me to a house would repel most people, or a lot of people. So she's probably already on edge by living near a graveyard, and that alone can freak people out. Then she finds a fucking crypt. I think it's fantastic. Fantastic. But her crumpled in a ball when he comes home, you know, it's a good thing they get a babysitter because she needs a break.
Yeah, she needs break from putting all those dishes away. And So Hot. I love the introduction of this character. She seems to be at both times quite pleasant, but also monstrously suspicious. And they really do a couple of weird things in several scenes in which they do these close up reaction shots of everyone's eyes kind of looking at each other. And anytime that a director makes decisions like this, you have to be watching the film thinking to yourself, well, what the hell does this mean? Because typically speaking, this would be a scene that you would do if these characters were like having an affair with each other or something of that nature. But it's not clear. It's so early on in the introduction of this character that it seems quite strange. But Bob is having horrific visions, by the way. He's plagued by horrific visions. Now he is continuously talking to May. May likes to drop a little bit of science and knowledge on this kid every now and again when Bob is naturally a curious little boy and exploring this graveyard and finding the Freudstein. This is just a family plot. Am I correct in assuming that, or is this a public graveyard?
This is a public graveyard surrounding the house because there's a lot of other graves there. But the plot that is sort of set closest to the house, just in the edge of the forest there, I believe it is a family plot. They're not actually buried there, according to young May, though. I guess she knows they're buried in the house. But what's weird is that crypt opening doesn't lead to a grave.
No, it doesn't. We've got ourselves an acute case of Evil Dead basement.
Evil Dead basement? Pretty much.
Well, yeah. The problem is that just like in the Evil Dead, when you look at that basement that everyone goes down into, it's fucking humongous. And it's hard to really get your bearings about how large this basement actually is. There is nooks, there is crannies, there is an entire fucking crypt. This almost exact thing, probably why it's in the Gates of Hell trilogy, is in City of the Living Dead. This exact type of basement into a humongous fucking crypt is present in that film as well. And so, and the Beyond as well, I think. But like the interesting thing is that they are going to be Bob is going to be drawn to this fucking space, but his mother also seems to be really weirded out by this. She's only placated for a short amount of time, gang. She is not entirely convinced, having some strange experiences herself, hearing noises. And again, like these are the haunting elements. Let me ask you this. Do you find that these haunting elements don't work because we've seen that there's a literal dude in the house already? Like, we know that there's a guy in there. Ghosts don't stab you with knives and drag your corpse into the fucking basement. So all of this haunting stuff, even though ghosts are present, the threat doesn't seem to be the ghosts.
No, yeah. No, but maybe. I'm pretty convinced from the get-go that there is some sort of veil between two worlds. So I'm not so worried about the guy in the basement because he hasn't made himself evident. What has are the ghosts that seem to be able to willingly cross that barrier. Even Anne, the babysitter, who seems to have been manifested by May from a mannequin, a store mannequin, who gets beheaded, bloody, in a very bloody manner, but makes no sense because she shows up at the door. So I'm so unnerved thinking that Anne is going to flip shit and murder them all because she's a store mannequin come to life as a babysitter that acts strangely but doesn't seem to know she's not human? Or am I confused? You know, like I'm hung up on the "and" thing entirely, that the basement doesn't even weird me out anymore. The fact that there's maybe a killer in the basement, I'm pretty sure he only comes out to play when people are banging or something. Or we need to have crossed over or have them realize that they've crossed over or done some trigger event to cross over to unleash him. So I'm not so worried about him for whatever reason because I'm so worried about Anne.
Anne is very strange. And later on in the film, she just gets increasingly more suspicious. When we find this tombstone, the tombstone is this crypt tomb thing that's in the living or in the kitchen for some reason. We see the name Jacob Tess Freudstein on it. And again, we are seeing this connection. This is the Freudstein house. Norman is here because of Freudstein. And this is a dude, a doctor, professor, a doctor, who died quite a few years ago, over a century, I believe. And he is, and then we're seeing that there's something up with Mary Freudstein's grave, as May will inform us. There's got to be something in that basement that needs to be investigated. This scene is buck fucking wild. So Norman will, through extreme effort, find this old bunch of keys, and his job is to prove to his wife that, do not worry, dear Lucy, there is nothing behind this door. I will show you. And he is immediately attacked after opening the lock by a bat. Then the bat attacks Lucy. Then Norman watches, cold, stoned, serious, watches his wife get viciously attacked by a bat. And gang, I am not joking. For over 1 minute, he stands there moving, saying, doing nothing while she is attacked by a bat. And then, and only then, does he languidly walk over to the bat to attempt to get it from attacking his wife. And then this bat is going to bite his hand and bite it and bite it and bite it for minutes on end, where he eventually takes a pair of kitchen scissors and stabs his fucking lids. This scene goes on for a fucking century.
It really does. And it's insane to me where he's getting attacked and screaming for, like you said, almost a minute. Then she is for a minute, if not longer. The whole thing probably takes 5 whole minutes, and it's very bloody. And my favorite part is near the end of this very long 5-minute scene with this screaming bat, this prop from a Dracula movie. Bob gets splattered with blood, and he just looks at his body like, oh my, I'm traumatized now, kind of thing. It's a beautiful little scene. They bookend this with either them almost stabbing themselves opening this door because the key is rusty, so they decide to use a filleting knife to pry it open, which is like, I'm convinced, because we've seen enough Italian horror movie, that blade is going to go into somebody's eye, because they also keep doing the close-up eyeball thing. It's very tense, and it ends with that tension relief of a little boy being splattered in blood. It's fantastic.
This is kind of a picky ass comment, but I do find it interesting that where he stabs the bat is not where the bat starts bleeding from. Like, the bat seems to ooze blood from everywhere but that stab wound. And yeah, this is just a little brown bat. I mean, it's big because but it looks like a stuffed animal, but it's so bloody and so gory. And at this juncture, Norman can't keep his wife at bay. His son, his little blonde boy in a white sweater, got blood all over himself. This bat has attacked them. They need to do the most sensible thing, which is get the fuck out of this house. Norman is fully able to do his research. Anyway, this is what I don't understand. If your job is to research this house, why the fuck do you need to live in it? That was like my problem with Sinister. Why did Ethan Hawke's character, a murder took place in a house and I'm writing about this case, I'm gonna live in the house? Why? Why do you need to do that?
Apparently they had a apartment lined up, but Lucy dragged her feet on agreeing to the lease, and it was rented out from underneath them, so they had to move into the Freudstein house. And it's neat that the realtor is on their side and helpful and has other properties. Like, why they didn't offer up one of those other properties previously, I don't know, but maybe it was also that particular property hadn't had anyone in it, and maybe because of its local lore, they felt, well, maybe we can shoehorn these people in there and finally rent this goddamn place out.
The realtor is so funny, and I'm really glad you brought that up. I did kind of forget the detail about Lucy dragging her feet and then they lost the spot. But then the realtor's reaction later on in the film, when they do actually want to move, of like, we need to get a new place. And he's like, well, I guess, sure. And then they add the line, do you think it'd be a problem to find a new house? And he's like, I don't think it'd be a problem, but, it should be fine. Like, he's so casual about it, as if the question of, should it be difficult for us to find another house to move into while I do this research, the notion of that being a problem, ludicrous to him. Of course there's houses all over the place. This is Italy. There's fucking, like, maybe in 1981, there wasn't quite the shortage on housing around the world as there is these days. But, well, I mean, that has to be true. To be true.
Absolutely true. So now we get the same realtor who had said to Norman, weren't you here before? Are you sure you weren't here before? This isn't the first time. There's another professor friend of his that was like, well, when you came and visited your colleague. And he's like, no, I've never visited my colleague. There's this like weird lingering doppelganger effect or something going on in this town, because twice now people have said to him, haven't you been here before? So that is another thing sort of like lingering, where I've almost now at this point forgotten that there's a zombie man in the basement, a Jason Voorhees, if you will. Because that's how he behaved at the beginning of the film, that there was some sort of killer that would pose bodies and everything and go after people that are banging. So very slasher-esque. I've almost forgotten about that, because we have still May appearing to Bob, the killer bat from the basement. We have Anne, who is this like sleeping, lurking threat of some sort, because we know she's a decapitated mannequin that was manifested by May and not human at all, and is scrabbling to get into the basement at night, which is never really explained. But now we have the fact that they are going to be able to move to a new house, right? So the realtor comes over, I guess, with keys. She doesn't make it out of the house alive.
No, another viciously brutal death, tons of blood. The camera lingers on her with the fire poker, and and she is down for the count. Anne is going to be cleaning up this blood stain that's the result of this murder. And when Lucy asks her, like, what the fuck are you doing? She won't answer the question. This type of thing always drives me crazy in movies, because I'm the type of motherfucker that won't let that go. Even if you were to, let's say you spilled coffee on the kitchen floor, and I saw you on your hands and knees and you're cleaning the kitchen floor, like scrubbing it. And I would be like, oh, what happened here? If for some stretch of the imagination, you're like, I can't tell Wes that I spilled coffee. You looked up to me and were evasive. I would just like, no, like, what are you cleaning up? Because the second you won't tell me, I'm like, now I think it's serious. Beforehand, lie. Like, just even, I just don't understand how you think not answering a question is going to get where you want. And we know that Anne is fucking weird because we know that she's probably like an automaton of some kind.
Like
And
a
this
golem or something? I'm not really
golem is,
sure if
yeah,
she like a Renfield.
yeah, I think golem is the best way to describe what she is. A hot golem. But
Super hot golem.
super
And like
hot
we
golem.
have Katrina McCall, who is the or I guess Catherine is what she's billed as. Just a very, very, very beautiful woman. So we have, maybe it's partially the two women facing off thing, where Anne is a brain dead golem who's also super hot, but then Lucy feels like I can't question her further if she will not answer me as to what this blood is all about because she's younger and hotter.
There's something really strange about the hiring of Anne as the babysitter because it's not entirely clear what they need the babysitter for. Lucy is home almost at all times, and every time that Bob is out of sight from his parents, Anne is of no help. She's never around when Bob is talking to May. Perhaps it's a convenient way that May can get Bob alone because she can feed him information. There's this weird juncture in which Bob does refer to May as his girlfriend. So I'm curious about what exactly they mean by this, but it is this strange connection that May has specifically. Now, we don't know if May has attempted to do this type of stuff before, like go ahead and warn other people in the household. Whatever she's tried to do before is monstrously unsuccessful. That's for damn sure.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think that Anne actually helps her either. You know, Anne gets accepted into the household by saying that she was sent by the real estate agent as a nanny or something, which is just weird. The fact that they opened the door to this woman in the first place is super weird. And I think that it's, again, one of those things that make this like this weird liminal, like the supernatural and untoward within the commonplace, where any North American family to have a nanny sent by the realtor, they would turn them away and just be like, sorry, yeah, we don't need your help, this is weird. Where maybe in pre-1980s Europe, that's normal to have your au pair set up for you by the realtor, which, you know, and just accepting people into their home. Very, very strange. But you know what? Having a nanny gives Lucy some freedom. You know, we've already seen that she's a little bit high strung. Maybe she needs to go out and do groceries and just relax, just clear her head. They're still waiting on the realtor, I guess, to get them out of this house. But in the meantime, might as well make your house a home.
This is a great opportunity for Norman to do some sleuthing of his own. Now, we don't just have a library scene, Lydia. We have ourselves a cassette tape scene. Great stuff. Speaking of the Evil Dead, I do like the idea of him getting some information about Dr. Freudstein, who at this point, it seems to be a lot of lost information until he gets the critical bit of information that we have in which Freudstein is an evil surgeon, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And it is like a lot like Hull House 2, with the fact that there's like debauchery and insanity going on in this house, and you're finding out about it mainly through audio recordings. And I guess Eel Marsh House has that sort of thing. You know, Crimson Peak has this same sort of library scene attached to it. And it just makes me more enamored with this film, even though it is sort of shoehorned in because he suddenly has to travel to New York from Boston. And he seems to be there in a blink of an eye due to movie magic or what have you, while his wife has to deal with what's going on in this house. So it's placed right in that we're learning that there is true evil lurking in that house, thanks to Professor Peterson's tapes left about Freudstein and his Dr. Satan-esque experiments, while Bob is being trapped in the basement after seeing Anna be decapitated by a creature that's down there. I mean, it gets off the hook insane while our husband's in New York for the day.
It's wild. The craziest thing is that when Anne is murdered by this guy in the basement, Lucy refuses to believe it. Of all things, why would your son be making this up? But also, conveniently, we can't find Anne anywhere. And then this causes Bob. Anne is looking for Bob initially, going down into the basement, and she
Like
suffers.
a good babysitter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's probably one of her most lucid human-like moments, actually.
Yeah. Like, oh, where's old Bob? It's like, and the kind of the mystery of Anne will be lost with her as she is viciously killed and decapitated. Bob calling down to the basement. Mom says you're not really dead, because she finds him. He tried to escape. His hand got wedged between this door, and he manages to get stuck there, but she eventually gets him out. He will then get trapped in there for real. If there's one thing that's not going to help your mother unlock the door, it's you continuously banging and yarding on the door, which of course gets the key snapped. It's so frustrating. Like I'm just like watching this scene. I'm like, kid, like I'm starting to agree with the general audiences that you're one of the most annoying children in horror. You won't stop fucking screaming. But more than anything, it's not the fact that he's yelling. I'm like, all right, he's scared. But the shaking of the door while she's trying to unlock this key or to unlock this latch. But of course, he settles right the fuck down when his father, Norman, just inextricably shows up just in the nick of time. And he was like, where's the axe? The axe? He just turns around.
The axe is right here.
Yes, the old living room axe. It's right here. It's been here the whole time. Don't question it. And so this scene is actually really fun because we don't see, his parents have no idea, but for some reason, he tells his son to get away from the door. No problem, Pop. I'm going to stop yelling. And when a rotten hand then has his head pressed to the door, he still manages to stay quiet for all of whatever reason. It's not really entirely clear. But I love the narrow misses from the axe. It's so good. There's a lot of good tension here. And one of the things about Italian horror films, and we know this, is they fucking go for it. Like, so you don't think that anyone is necessarily safe. They will kill a fucking kid. They don't care. And so it would be kind of deliciously tragic. If Bob got an axe in his head, I would be extremely impressed by this film.
This whole scene is really a go-to. You know, if you're on the fence about watching this, like fast forward to this scene on YouTube if you need to. The opening scene sells it for me. A knife through the back of the head, poking out the mouth, blood everywhere. It's gorgeous. This is equally gorgeous because you have this beautiful girl, Anne, being slaughtered, getting decapitated, but in a slow, languid fashion, a very Fulci-esque fashion, and a lot of very dark blood. You get a bit of that bright red sort of Kensington gore later on. And with the poker scene, it's pretty bright red blood, but this is in a dark basement. So everything has that more macabre look of too much dark red blood. And yeah, it's quite scary and gory. And then, like you said, the tension building scene of this axe through the door thing, classic, wonderful. And from basically the point where Bob gets trapped in the basement and starts screaming, I'm scared, Mommy, I'm scared. From there on to the end of the film is just pretty much balls out insane. So if you tuned in for this scene, I I don't think you will turn it off, because it just gets weirder and gorier and scarier and more supernatural from here on in.
We have bodies hanging from the ceiling. We've got body parts strewed about. Lids, what is Freudstein doing with all of these bodies? Why is this 150-year-old man in a evil medical man's outfit with a weird California raisin prune head? What does he need all these murders? Does he just like the thrill of the hunt? Does he just like to mutilate people?
Dr. Satan! He's just Dr. Satan. He's basically fucking Dr. Satan! Yeah. He is harvesting cells, don't you know? Can't you tell? He's harvesting cells to feed his longevity. This is how he rejuvenates, Wes. I mean, we only know this because we get told that by our wonderful Professor Norman Boyle. I wouldn't have put two and two together, because I'm just like, it's like Hellraiser, where there's like a liminal space in the basement, and it's the veil is thin and monsters cross over? Question mark. Freudstein. It doesn't make perfect sense. Just like Anne being an actual human doesn't make perfect sense to me. But the bodies seem to appear and disappear, because Anne's body was nowhere to be found when Bob was down there with his mom. His mom like marched him down there with a flashlight to prove that their babysitter wasn't dead and decapitated, just missing, I guess. So the bodies are all back now. So I guess, was he did they say that he was experimenting with other dimensions at all?
No, it seemed to be that his experimentations were of the flesh. So he was doing, maybe it is a bit like Hellraiser in the sense that it's just consistently vague about what anyone is really doing, what
Yeah.
version of hell that was supposed to be, and precisely what the Cenobites are. They're so wishy-washy about it. Why, how people find the lament configuration, why people know about it. There's so many questions about that franchise that they're wishy-washy on, and I think that's part of the horror, which is to make it kind of unknowable. Maybe that's the H.P. Lovecraft aspect of it. You don't need all of the details spelled out for you, and indeed sometimes it's good when they aren't spelled out for you. But I will say, adding the extra detail of Freudstein needing these bodies to perpetuate his unlife is interesting. It gives it kind of a very heavily medical sense. Like, it seems the namesake makes sense, right? Stein, Frankenstein. Like, it seems as though it's science and alchemy mixed together to create a sort of immortality. And perhaps it wasn't what Freudstein wanted or had envisioned for the extension of his life. But imagine if perhaps Mary Shelley's book went another way and Dr. Frankenstein, instead of finding a cure for immortality by way of resurrecting a cadaver, he found a way into himself to extend his own life. But then, much like in the book, he realizes that by playing God, he created a monster. But in this, by playing God with himself, Freudstein had made a monster of himself, but is now addicted to this idea of perhaps he just needs more body to not only perpetuate his own life, but find a cure for his condition. Maybe he feels like with enough bodies and enough research, he could find a way to look normal. I'm sure him being a horror in a dusty old mansion in a basement that he can never step out of, because my question, honestly, it was, what the fuck is he doing down there all day? There doesn't seem to be really anything except for empty cobwebbed shelves and other bodies. So he doesn't even have a TV down there. He must be doing something. So I would assume continuing his own research obsessively, and in order to get it right. But in order to do that, he needs more bodies. But don't you worry, don't you fret, Lydia, because he's a bad guy. And bad guys always lose.
Oh,
except in Italian horror.
yeah, not in this film or Italian horror. And I thought you were gonna say bad guys always have cool jackets.
He does have a very cool jacket, but fucking Norman wrecks it. By the way, this guy is packed full of maggots like you read about. This scene is genuinely disgusting. I'm not good with maggots anyway. I always get a little squeamish around maggots, but usually in film I'm all right. This one I was eating while I was watching this movie, and I literally sit back in my chair and say, all right, that's actually pretty gross, because it's not just maggots. It looks like it's mixed with like Chef Boyardee or something.
See, that's not very edgelord of you, Wes. You're supposed to be like, I was eating fucking pizza. I don't care. I don't care. I fucking eat pizza and watch this all the fucking time. Yeah, I don't get
Edgelord.
grossed out. I don't get grossed out by stuff like this so much. Like, if he was brushing his teeth, I might have had to cover my eyes. Yeah, it's true. It's true. My
A
guess
video
was,
of me eating pizza would be more horrific to you than this movie.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I can take the actual live maggots mixed with what, chocolate pudding, Chef Boyardee. Who knows? It's gross, but I could handle that. And I think that even if someone had taken a little spoonful of it, little tasty taste, little num 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 num, num, what is that? I would be able to stomach that too. But if they ate it sloppily, then I'd be down for the count. Yeah, and he's like digging his knife in there too. It's not just a stab and the maggots come pouring out, which I think is something that's lost in more North American filmmaking. That you think you stab someone and it just opens up this giant rent and their guts just come tumbling out like a little waterfall of maggots and guts. Where I think maybe it's because they have practices. Maybe they have horror experiments over there in Italy, and they're like, well, what happens when you stab a maggot infested cadaver of like a dead cow on the side of the road? And they just get to experiment with this sort of stuff maybe more readily in the 70s and 80s, where we don't have these sort of experiments. The regular filmmaker is sort of coddled and a little bit of a little Lord Fauntleroy compared to the Italian filmmaker, who is in the trenches, so to speak, and able to access cadavers and stuff like that. So they know that you can't just stab into it and have this stuff pour out. You need to stab in there and dig it around a little, Wes. You gotta like scoop it out, help it along.
Yeah, it's pretty congealed and, like I said, maggoty and gross. Now Norman is going to get his throat ripped out for his troubles. This is genuinely shocking. This is where the haunting portion of our film leaves, because for the longest time, by the way, as I had mentioned, it feels as though you're watching a haunting picture. Could you imagine Blumhouse releasing a ghost story, a haunted mansion film in which the nuclear family gets brutally fucking murdered by the ghosts at the end of it? Hang on a sec, because that is what happens in Sinister. But I don't, speaking of Sinister, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's Blumhouse. But the interesting thing is that this now turns into a slasher territory. And then you think to yourself, holy fuck, we spent so much time with Norman, and we really thought that his information was going to save the day. Now, unlike a haunting, this is not exactly a scenario in which reading the perfect piece of microfiche is going to help you solve a problem, which really is the benchmark of a haunting. You would think that perhaps uncovering the secrets of this mansion might alleviate some of the curse, the spiritual pressure, whatever you want to call it, that is in on this place. At the very least, depower it. But Dr. Freudstein is not a ghost. He is he's a man that just happens to be quite old and nigh unkillable. And so now he turns his sights on old Lucy and Bob. Now, we just saw the patriarch of the Boyle family brutally killed. And now We see Freudstein slow as molasses uphill, walking towards them while they cower. They are trying to get through this crack in the tombstone that is in their kitchen. And why they are not trying literally anything else, I have no fucking idea. But they are convinced that this is the way out. And Lucy, in probably one of the least graphic but most hilarious deaths in this entire franchise, is dragged down the stairs to death, Lydia.
I know. And I have lingering shades of don't torture a duckling. I wish that those stairs went on forever and ever, because it would be hilarious to me if her face started to fall apart due to the impact of those stairs. And yeah, it is filmed just so awkwardly and almost slapsticky. And you see where you get inspirations from films like this for something like Brain Dead or Dead Alive, where it is horrific and gory and terrifying and dangerous, but kind of slapstickish, because it's just that camera angle. Had he shot it from a foot or two back, it probably just would have looked pretty normal, but that we're zoomed in and following her head down step by step, it's almost like comedic. I don't know what it is, the repetition.
It doesn't even really look like she's making contact with it, to be 100% honest with you. It's a lot like the knife in Psycho. It just looks like it's dancing around her and not actually making impact. And in fact, if not for the fact that we see her at the foot of the stairs getting dragged away with a huge blood stain where her face is, I wouldn't even be 100% sure that she was even dead. But we see that Bob is the only person left, and he just is very content on getting through that crack, which doesn't seem like it's large enough for him. But much like a cat, if you get your head through, which he manages to do, perhaps the rest will come. Now, Freudstein does grab him, but he is inextricably saved, by May, and more accurately, May's mother, who then brings them up to the kitchen and carries them off. What do you say? They're off to the spirit realm. Is Bob dead?
I'm guessing Bob's dead, and I'm guessing that everyone dies, because we have the patriarch, whose science should have saved the day, getting killed to death, basically, by Freudstein. The mother, whose mama bear strength should have been able to lift that tombstone and save her child, or at least shove his fat head through the crack or something, because it was so vaginal, was it not? Was Bob not being birthed, Wes, through that crack?
Oh my God. Rebirthed through the house.
Yeah. That's like, if you want to get ridiculous about it. But no, that wasn't good enough for her. She was dragged away from her progeny and dashed on the concrete floor and piled up with the rest of the bodies in the house, which are all visible now. And when you ask, what's Freudstein doing down there? I don't know. And I agree that he should have had like a laboratory for real down there. But it seemed to flip into another dimension, because the bodies all do disappear from time to time. So like you have like a different vision or a different face that you're looking at when you look down in this basement. You can either see the body of Anne decapitated down there or not. You see a dusty, musty old basement for the most part, but maybe Freudstein sees something different when he's down there.
I would like this notion of shifting between worlds, of liminal space or something like that. But I would like it to be a little bit more obvious. Like if they could just give a visual cue that that's what's happening, show the bodies vanishing or reappearing, show perhaps you walking to one area, now all of a sudden you're in another part of the house, maybe another time period, something to indicate what is going on. Instead, we have this film ending with carrying May and Bob away. And Bob doesn't really he seems more in wonder than he does afraid. he does cry out when his mother is killed, far more than his father, but cries out when his mother is killed. But once the mother is dead, it's almost as if he kind of forgets that he even had parents.
Which is what a good ghost world does. I find that something broke in Bob seeing his parents get killed, because when Freudstein is advancing on him, even after Anne's death, there's some points where he's not giving a terrified child look. And we get a lot of terrified child. We get a lot of mommy, help me kind of stuff. But we also get Bob regarding Freudstein's monster, if you will, much like, okay, you have gone too far, sir. Very, very serious, very adult. And I think that it's just supposed to be showing us that Bob's kind of being pushed beyond a limit. So when he gets pulled up to the cacophonous laughing of other ghost children, I might add, through that crack to join May and her mother, Mrs. Freudstein, in the ghost world, he must be entirely gone by that point.
As they are shuffled off, we turn back to the Freudstein mansion, Oak Mansion. You're not fooling me, realtors. And it says, no one will ever know whether children are monsters or monsters are children. And that is Henry James.
Now, I'm pretty sure that it is in reference to Turn of the Screw.
Makes sense.
But it is a fitting little end to this film, I thought, because we have spent so much time in this sort of ghost world, whether we knew it or not, especially down in that basement. Very, very creepy film and very bloody. So if you like a paranormal ghost story, but you also feel like a bit of a slasher, you can have them both together at last.
I do really enjoy this film. I could see why it was so successful with Fulci. Fulci was a type of director that never really held back in terms of the types of films that he wanted to make, and has made a lot of really memorable contributions to horror. And his name is synonymous with Italian horror, and it's right up there with Bava and Argento and all these guys that really put their mark on slashers and giallos and zombie films, the supernatural world. There was something so unique of that place and that time where films like this were coming out with some regularity. They did taper off as the decades waned on in terms of like what people really wanted to see. People kind of didn't really like Fulci's output towards the end. I think that it's a little over exaggerated that all those films are terrible, but at the very least, a lot of people contend that this is still amongst his golden era of making some really memorable horror films. And so it's fun to finally tackle a Fulci film properly.
And I think that not that giallos have overstayed their welcome. I'm not tired of a black glove killer, so to speak, but I think that lumping Fulci in with those sorts of films is doing him dirty, because there's so much more here, so much more horror lore, and he's done a really good version of monster films, zombie films, paranormal films. I think I need to, like most people, watch a lot more Fulci than I ever have. I'm really jealous now of the people that have watched all of his work, because I am going to have to carve out some time to do just that.
Hell yeah. So what have we got next for them?
Next, we go to a different master of horror. It is summertime, and you know what summertime means here at the Dead Air podcast. It is Stephen King-a-palooza. And to kick that off, we have a different kind of monster in Stephen King's film Sleepwalkers.
This is going to be a lot of fun to finally tackle. And interestingly enough, our first Stephen King not adaptation. Wait, no, not adaptation. And this was always intended to be a film, and I feel like this film gets more attention as the years go on. It's very memeable. I see a lot of gifs of this particular film, particular some of the transformation sequences and stuff like that, and I feel as though it has become memeable, but to the point in which people are like, what is that? And I think a lot of people are more familiar with some of the imagery of the film, but they don't actually know what the movie is about. And when you watch the film versus when you hear about the film, two vastly different things.
Yeah, inappropriate mother-son relationships via the Bates Motel. That's what it reminds me of.
Yes, you absolutely speak of, like, we mentioned burial grounds earlier today, and now we're talking about Sleepwalkers next. It's all inappropriate mom and son stuff for the foreseeable future as we head into Stephen King of Palooza. It's been a while since we've done one proper, so I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, we've got not one, but two, but three Stephen King films on the slab so far, like that we've hammered out. So one, and after this one for sure, another, and maybe yet another. And who knows, maybe we'll just do Stephen King films in perpetuity if Mike Flanagan has any say in the matter.
But I have a say in the matter of when the show ends, and only I have that power, because I am Wes Knipe.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening, until I say so, to Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peever and hosted by Lydia Peever and me, Wes Knipe. We'll see you next time.